She was just a farm girl. But what if her unshakable faith wasn't just divine, but a psychological superpower that changed history? This is the defiant, improbable story of Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc's story has fascinated generations. A peasant girl with no formal education, no military training, and no political connections, yet she changed the course of history and became one of the most iconic figures in the struggle for freedom. But what was it that allowed her to do what no one thought possible? Was it truly divine intervention, or was there something deeply psychological at play? Something about conviction, belief, and inner strength that allowed Joan to rise above her humble beginnings and lead armies. In this video, we'll delve into the mind of Joan of Arc, examining the incredible psychological journey that transformed this simple farm girl into one of history's most powerful and inspiring leaders. We'll explore how her unwavering conviction, her unshakable faith, and her extraordinary resilience in the face of doubt and adversity helped her achieve feats that seemed impossible. Through this exploration, we'll not only understand the depths of Joan's power, but also discover universal lessons in conviction, leadership, and the transformative strength of belief. Joan of Arc, a farm girl from the remote village of Domremy, found herself at the center of one of the most incredible stories in history. With no formal education or military training, she rose to become the leader of an army, inspiring a nation and altering the course of the 100 Years' War. But how did this seemingly improbable transformation occur? This video will take you on a psychological journey through Joan's life, exploring the unique mindset that allowed her to achieve what no one expected. We'll look into the voices that spoke to her from a young age, the psychological nature of her conviction, and how she led with unparalleled courage despite immense doubt and skepticism. From the moment she stepped onto the national stage, Joan became a force of nature. Her story is not just about a woman's rise to power. It is about the power of belief itself. Join us as we explore the mind of Joan of Arc, the girl who, with nothing but her inner strength, changed the world forever. Joan of Arc's journey began with what she described as voices that spoke to her from a young age. Growing up in Domremy, a small village in northeastern France, Joan was a simple peasant girl. Her family was poor, and she had little access to formal education or the luxuries of the world around her. Yet from the age of 13, she began hearing voices, which she claimed were the voices of saints, Saint Michael, Saint Catherine, and Saint Margaret, who instructed her to take up arms and lead the French to victory against the English, who were dominating the French throne during the 100 Years' War. From a psychological perspective, these voices could be seen as visions, potentially the result of a combination of factors such as stress, religious fervor, or even a form of dissociation. However, to Joan, they were not a product of her imagination. They were her unwavering guide. Joan's certainty in her mission was absolute. She believed her mission was divinely ordained and that the voices were a direct communication from God. This deep, unshakable conviction became the cornerstone of her power. Psychologically, what made Joan's belief in these voices so extraordinary was her absolute certainty. In a world filled with skepticism, doubt, and religious complexity, Joan's faith was pure and unyielding. Her belief was so strong that it never wavered, even when others questioned her sanity or dismissed her claims. To her, there was no doubt she was chosen and the voices were real. This certainty wasn't just a matter of religious conviction. It was the psychological foundation that enabled her to act with fearlessness, even in the face of overwhelming obstacles. In many ways, Joan's experience mirrors the concept of cognitive dissonance in psychology, where a person holds a belief so strongly that they will continue to act in line with it, even when faced with conflicting evidence. For Joan, the voices were not something she questioned. They were part of her reality, and it was this unshakable belief that propelled her forward, giving her the courage to defy the expectations of those around her and step into a role that no one else would have dared to take. Joan's psychological resilience wasn't just rooted in her religious conviction. It was her capacity to stand firm in the face of doubt, ridicule, and outright rejection. In a world where women were seldom allowed to hold power, let alone command armies, Joan was determined to follow her calling, regardless of the skepticism that surrounded her. her belief became a psychological superpower, one that allowed her to transcend the limitations that society imposed on her gender and class. This absolute certainty, what might be described as a conviction-based psychological strength, made Joan of Arc an incredibly compelling leader. It was not just her religious fervor that people rallied behind, but her ability to inspire confidence in others through the force of her own belief. Even the most cynical or politically minded men were drawn to her presence because she believed in her cause with a level of certainty that was contagious. Her conviction became a force in itself, capable of moving people who had nothing but skepticism to rely on. Joan's unwavering belief, whether viewed as divine intervention or intense internal conviction, was a manifestation of psychological strength. It was this belief that propelled her forward on her mission, and it would be the foundation of her leadership throughout her journey. In essence, Joan's psychological journey was a testament to the power of belief and the ways in which conviction, when fully embraced, can shape the course of history. Joan's story took a decisive turn when she set off on a perilous journey to meet the Dauphin, Charles VII, and convince him to support her mission to free France from English occupation. At just 16 years old, Joan was a young, unproven girl with no military experience, seeking to gain the trust of the French court. Her mission wasn't just improbable, it was audacious. She needed to convince the politically savvy and deeply skeptical Charles VII, a man who had seen his kingdom ravaged by years of war, that she was the key to France's salvation. When she first arrived at Chinon, Charles and his advisors were skeptical. They initially dismissed her as just another peasant with delusions of grandeur. After all, how could a young, uneducated girl possibly lead an army to victory? It took her extraordinary psychological resilience to even gain an audience with him. Joan's self-belief, deeply ingrained by the voices she claimed to hear, gave her the strength to press on despite the rejection she faced. Psychologically, Joan's perseverance during this time was remarkable. The mental fortitude required to continue on her path despite initial rejection cannot be overstated. Many individuals in her position would have been discouraged and given up, especially given the circumstances. But Joan persisted. She was convinced that this mission was divinely inspired and that eventually others would see the truth of it. Her ability to reject doubt, both from within and from others, demonstrated an extraordinary level of psychological resilience. For Joan, rejection wasn't just an inconvenience, it was part of the journey. Her mission was so deeply ingrained in her sense of self that even the most powerful men in France could not diminish her conviction. She was willing to face ridicule, rejection, and mockery because her belief was not rooted in external validation, it was an internal compass that guided her actions. This is a crucial psychological aspect of her leadership. Joan's power didn't come from her status, her military training, or her ability to convince others through logic. It came from her deep and unwavering belief in the truth of her mission. When Joan was finally allowed to meet with Charles VII, her natural charisma and absolute certainty began to have an effect. The Dauphin, initially unsure of her, was impressed by her confidence and the force of her belief. There was something magnetic about her certainty, a sense that she was more than just a young girl. She was the embodiment of something much larger. Even Charles's advisors, who had initially dismissed her, began to reconsider. Psychologically speaking, this moment marked a shift from skepticism to possibility. Joan didn't just change minds with words. She changed the way people perceived her by projecting an unwavering inner certainty that could not be easily dismissed. Her ability to move from rejection to acceptance, to persist in the face of doubt, is a testament to her psychological fortitude. Her self-belief, unshaken by the initial cold reception, eventually won her the support she needed to carry out her mission. For Joan, this journey wasn't just about convincing Charles II, it was about proving to herself that she could succeed, even in the face of insurmountable obstacles. She didn't need to convince everyone, just the ones who mattered most. And in this, we see one of the key elements of her psychological strength, the ability to stay focused on the core of her mission, regardless of the outside noise. This is a powerful lesson in leadership and resilience. When we are deeply aligned with our convictions, the opinions of others, while important, do not dictate our path forward. Joan's persistence in the face of skepticism mirrors the challenges many of us face when pursuing a bold vision or new endeavor. The world is often full of doubters, and rejection is inevitable. But as Joan demonstrates, the key is not to allow that rejection to define us. Instead, we can use it as fuel to push forward, knowing that the path to success is rarely linear, and that belief, both in ourselves and our mission, is the most powerful force at our disposal. Once Joan of Arc gained the confidence of Charles VII, she was given command of the French army and tasked with lifting the siege of Orléans. To understand the enormity of this responsibility, it's important to recognize just how unprecedented this was. Joan, a young peasant girl with no formal military training, was now leading experienced soldiers into battle. Yet, what she lacked in military expertise, she made up for in something far more potent: intuition, charisma, and an unshakable belief in her cause. Psychologically speaking, this is where Joan's leadership qualities truly come to the forefront. Her ability to inspire seasoned soldiers and lead them with confidence, even in the face of overwhelming odds, demonstrates a deep understanding of the psychological dynamics of leadership. Joan didn't command through fear or strategy alone. She commanded through belief. She was a living embodiment of the cause, and her certainty about victory was contagious. Joan's leadership at Orléans was not about traditional tactics or military strategy. Instead, it was about rallying her troops, inspiring them with her unwavering confidence, and making them believe that victory was not only possible, but inevitable. She understood that the true power of an army lies not just in its weapons, but in the morale of its soldiers. The power of belief, she showed, could shift the course of battle. Her intuition, the psychological ability to read the emotional landscape of the battlefield, played a huge role in her success. While many generals might have relied on detailed intelligence and careful planning, Joan was able to intuitively understand the state of her troops and the direction of the conflict. She understood when to charge, when to regroup, and when to let the momentum of belief carry her soldiers forward. Her gut instincts guided her through some of the most critical moments of the siege. Her charisma was also a vital element in her ability to lead. She had a unique ability to make people believe in her and in themselves. Joan did not lead from a position of traditional authority. She didn't hold a noble title or military rank. What she did have was an extraordinary ability to connect with people on an emotional and psychological level. She exuded a calm, unwavering presence that made people feel invincible. This power to uplift and unite was at the core of her leadership. This kind of charisma is often described as transformational leadership, where the leader creates a vision that motivates and inspires others to perform beyond expectations. Joan's ability to rally men who were weary from years of war and inspire them to fight with renewed vigor was a manifestation of this transformational style. She was able to galvanize a nation through belief, not through command. Joan's psychological approach to leadership was particularly significant in the context of her time. The men she led were not just soldiers, they were individuals who had witnessed the devastation of years of war. Many of them were doubtful and tired. Yet Joan's unshakable belief in the cause transformed them. The soldiers did not just fight for her, they fought because they believed in her vision, her confidence, and most importantly, the righteousness of their mission. Joan, as a leader, became a symbol of hope, a figure who transcended the ordinary. Her success on the battlefield was not merely the result of military tactics, but of her ability to inspire and elevate the spirits of those around her. In psychological terms, Joan tapped into the power of collective efficacy, the belief that a group can achieve something significant together. By fostering this belief in her soldiers, she elevated their sense of capability and transformed their outlook on the battlefield. This is one of the core lessons we can take from her leadership. When you lead with conviction and make others believe in themselves, you can achieve the impossible. Joan's leadership at Orléans ultimately led to the lifting of the siege, a pivotal victory for France. The victory wasn't just a military triumph, it was a psychological one. It demonstrated that belief, when shared and embodied by a leader, can turn the tide of even the most entrenched conflicts. Joan of Arc wasn't just leading an army, she was leading a movement based on faith, hope, and a belief in the impossible. Her intuitive understanding of leadership, coupled with her ability to inspire others, makes her one of the most remarkable leaders in history. Joan did not need to be a trained military strategist to change the course of the war. What she had was a deeply rooted sense of conviction and the ability to impart that conviction to others. In a world full of skepticism, Joan proved that leadership born from authenticity, belief, and the power of human connection could defy the odds and change history. After the victory at Orléans, Joan's next goal was to see Charles VII crowned as the legitimate king of France. This was a symbolic and deeply psychological milestone for Joan, and it was a moment that encapsulated her entire mission. She had been tasked with ensuring that Charles, the Dauphin, would ascend to the throne, an act that would rally the French people and give them a sense of unity and purpose in their fight against English occupation. But as significant as the coronation was, it also marked a shift in Joan's role and the psychological complexities that arose as she navigated the new dynamics of power and politics. The coronation of Charles VII at Reims in July 1429 was not just a political victory, it was a deeply symbolic one. It validated Joan's divine mission. This was her primary goal, the moment that would confirm the truth of the voices that had guided her. The coronation represented the culmination of her efforts, and it was, in many ways, the fulfillment of her mission. Joan had helped secure the throne for Charles, and the French people saw her as the one who had brought about this divine moment of salvation. Psychologically, this event marked a significant transition for Joan. Throughout her journey, she had been a commander on the battlefield, leading armies with confidence and purpose. But now, in the aftermath of the coronation, she found herself at a crossroads. No longer the sole leader of a military campaign, Joan's position had shifted from that of a battlefield commander to a symbolic figurehead. She was no longer just a military leader. She was now part of the larger political and religious narrative. This was a transition that came with its own set of challenges. As Joan navigated the intricacies of court life, political intrigue, and shifting allegiances, her sense of self and her singular vision became increasingly difficult to maintain. She had always been a leader in a world of clarity. Her mission was divine, her belief absolute, and her cause righteous. But now, amidst the political maneuvering of the French court, Joan faced a psychological dilemma. How could she remain true to her calling when surrounded by the complexities and contradictions of power? Joan had always been a figure of moral clarity. Her belief in her divine mission had been simple, direct, and focused. Yet, as her role in the French court became more entangled with the realities of politics, it became increasingly difficult for her to maintain that same clarity. The court was full of intrigue, power struggles, and shifting loyalties. Joan, with her straightforward vision, was now confronted with a much more complex and uncertain world, one where political considerations often took precedence over the ideals she had once fought for. This psychological shift was not just internal, it had external consequences as well. Joan's influence began to wane as political tensions within the French court escalated. Charles VII, now securely crowned, had less immediate need for her leadership on the battlefield. His focus turned to consolidating his power, and the political dynamics of the court became more complex. Joan, who had once been the embodiment of the French resistance, found herself marginalized and increasingly isolated. The very beliefs that had propelled her to greatness now became the source of tension and division. Joan's struggle during this period is a powerful psychological lesson about the complexities of power and leadership. It highlights how, even in the face of tremendous success, the transition from being a figure of pure moral clarity to one of political compromise can be disorienting and challenging. Joan's idealism had always been a strength, but in the world of political power, it became a source of tension. Her struggle to maintain her vision in the face of political realities speaks to the difficulties of holding on to one's authentic self when external circumstances and pressures change. This tension between divine mission and political necessity would have a profound effect on Joan's trajectory. The ideals that had driven her, her belief in the divine and her unwavering sense of purpose remained intact. However, her growing disillusionment with the political maneuvering around her marked the beginning of a psychological shift. Joan would soon find herself caught between the forces of divine faith and the harsh realities of the world she had entered. The coronation of Charles II was the culmination of Joan's mission, but it was also a moment of transformation, one that brought with it both triumph and challenge. As Joan's role shifted from a military leader to a symbol of divine intervention, she had to navigate the complexities of court life, shifting allegiances, and political maneuvering. Her ability to maintain her singular vision in the face of these pressures would ultimately be tested in the trials that lay ahead. After the coronation, Joan of Arc's role in the French court began to diminish. As Charles VII consolidated his power, the political tides shifted, and Joan, once the central figure in the French resistance, was pushed to the periphery. In 1430, Joan was captured by the Burgundians, who were allied with the English. Her capture marked a dramatic turn in her story, and from this point on, her psychological fortitude would be tested like never before. Joan's capture was not just a physical defeat, it was a profound psychological blow. She had spent her entire life fighting for a cause she believed was divinely inspired, and now she was held captive by the very forces she had fought against. She was no longer the victorious leader, but a prisoner of war, and her psychological resilience was put to the ultimate test. What could have been a moment of defeat became instead a moment of unparalleled resolve. When Joan was handed over to the English, they quickly saw her as more than just a military prisoner. She was a symbol of France's resistance. In an attempt to break her spirit and discredit her, the English put her on trial for heresy, witchcraft, and cross-dressing, accusing her of being a tool of the devil. The trial was politically motivated, and the charges were baseless, but they represented the culmination of everything Joan had stood against. In the face of these accusations, Joan's psychological strength was put under extreme pressure. The interrogation she underwent was brutal, and the psychological torment she faced was immense. Joan was isolated, questioned relentlessly, and threatened with death. The English sought to break her, to force her to recant her beliefs and abandon her mission. Yet through it all, Joan held firm. Despite the immense pressure, she refused to deny the voices that had guided her, the conviction that had sustained her throughout her journey. Her resilience in the face of such extreme adversity is a powerful testament to the psychological strength she possessed. Psychologically, the trial and imprisonment represented a form of existential crisis for Joan. She was faced with the ultimate test. Would she betray her beliefs and save herself, or would she die for the cause she had spent her life fighting for? The pressure to recant must have been immense. She was a young woman, alone in a foreign land, facing the real threat of execution. Yet Joan's commitment to her vision was so profound that even in the face of death, she chose to remain true to her mission. One of the most striking elements of Joan's trial was her ability to maintain her inner strength, even when surrounded by overwhelming odds. She was not simply enduring torture. She was actively engaging with the trial, using her inner conviction as a shield against the attempts to break her. Her ability to hold firm to her truth, even in the face of life-threatening danger, demonstrated a level of psychological resilience that few people possess. It was not a refusal out of stubbornness. It was a profound moral commitment to her mission, to the voices that had guided her, and to the cause she had spent her life championing. In her trial, Joan's refusal to deny the voices and her refusal to recant her beliefs became an act of defiance, not just against the English, but against the forces of doubt and fear. Her spirit was unbroken, and she held steadfast to her truth, knowing that to betray her conviction would be to lose everything she had fought for. This psychological resolve, her capacity to endure unimaginable suffering without compromising her sense of self, became one of the defining aspects of her legacy. The trial culminated in Joan's conviction and sentence of death. On May 30th, 1431, she was burned at the stake in Rouen, France, at the age of just 19. Her death, however, was not the end of her story. In the years that followed, her legacy grew. In 1456, a posthumous retrial found her innocent of all charges, and she was officially declared a martyr of the Catholic Church. Joan's death was a turning point, but it was also the beginning of the transformation of her legacy into something that would inspire generations to come. Joan of Arc's refusal to recant, even in the face of death, speaks volumes about her psychological makeup. She embodied the deepest form of moral courage, the ability to remain true to one's beliefs, no matter the consequences. Her trial and execution serve as a powerful reminder of the psychological strength required to maintain integrity in the face of extreme adversity. Joan's life and death became a symbol of the unwavering power of belief, and her psychological resilience continues to inspire people around the world to this day. Joan of Arc's life, though tragically short, left an indelible mark on history, not only through her military accomplishments, but also through the profound psychological strength she exhibited. After her death, her legacy began to take on a life of its own, far beyond her role as a martyr for France's independence. Her story became a symbol of resilience, courage, and the power of unwavering belief in the face of overwhelming adversity. Even in the darkest moments of her life, Joan's legacy continued to shine, inspiring generations of people who would go on to fight for freedom, justice, and the triumph of personal conviction. Joan's journey was a psychological exploration of faith and resilience. She started as a humble peasant girl, unremarkable by many standards, but with an inner strength fueled by a deep, unshakable belief in her mission. Her journey was not one of conventional power or traditional military tactics, but rather a demonstration of the transformative power of belief. In a world where men were the primary leaders, Joan of Arc defied societal expectations to become one of the most iconic figures in history, not through the traditional means of power, but through sheer conviction. Her story serves as a reminder that true strength often lies not in external titles or recognized authority, but in the quiet, persistent courage to follow one's inner calling. Joan's impact is not just a historical fact, it is a psychological force that continues to resonate today. Her resilience in the face of trial, her refusal to relinquish her truth, and her ability to inspire others are qualities that have transcended time. Throughout history, countless movements for freedom, justice, and equality have drawn upon Joan's legacy for inspiration. Her story proves that one person's unwavering belief can have a ripple effect that changes the world, igniting change and inspiring action long after they are gone. Psychologically, Joan of Arc's legacy embodies the power of moral courage. She represents the ability to stand firm in one's beliefs, regardless of the pressure from external forces to conform. Her story reminds us that even in the face of great suffering or loss, the strength to remain true to one's inner convictions can have a transformative impact. In her case, that conviction helped rally a nation in a time of war. But her legacy also transcends military success. It serves as an example for all of us who struggle to hold on to our truth when the world seems to be pushing us in a different direction. In the decades following her execution, Joan's story began to spread beyond the borders of France. She became a symbol of defiance and resilience, inspiring leaders and ordinary people alike to rise above their circumstances and act with courage in the face of adversity. Her story resonated across continents, influencing countless freedom movements, from the fight for independence in colonial nations to the struggles for civil rights and justice. Psychologically, the power of Joan's story lies in its ability to inspire people to believe in themselves, even when the odds seem insurmountable. Her life is a testament to the idea that one individual, no matter how seemingly insignificant in the grand scope of history, can change the course of events by staying true to their beliefs. Joan's legacy transcended the historical moment in which she lived and continues to serve as a beacon of hope for anyone who feels overlooked, underestimated, or powerless. Her eventual canonization as a saint by the Catholic Church in 1920 was a recognition of not only her divine mission, but also the enduring power of her psychological resilience. The Church's decision to recognize her as a saint was not just a reflection of her religious significance, but a recognition of the universal lessons her life imparts. Joan's canonization was a formal acknowledgement of the strength, courage, and moral clarity she displayed throughout her life and in her death. It reinforced the idea that belief, whether spiritual or personal, has the power to change the world. Joan's life, though filled with suffering, also represents the immense power of an individual's faith. Her belief was her greatest asset, one that she carried with her through battle, through capture, and ultimately to the executioner's stake. In a world that often tries to suppress the voices of the unheard, Joan's story is a reminder that belief, when rooted in deep conviction, can not only withstand the greatest challenges, but can also inspire entire movements that shape the course of history. Joan of Arc's extraordinary life and legacy offer us profound psychological insights that extend far beyond her role in history. Her story is not just one of military triumphs and martyrdom. It is a universal narrative of conviction, resilience, and the power of personal belief. The lessons drawn from Joan's life have implications for anyone striving to live authentically, face adversity, and lead with unwavering purpose. At the heart of Joan's story is the concept of conviction. Joan's belief in her divine mission was so powerful that it acted as an inner compass, guiding every decision and action she took. Her strength didn't come from external recognition or validation, it came from within. The power of self-belief is a central lesson from Joan's life. In a world that often values external markers of success, titles, power, wealth, Joan teaches us that the most profound and transformative strength comes from knowing and acting on our internal truths. Her example shows us that true leadership comes not from authority or position, but from the courage to stand firm in one's own belief, even when others may dismiss or ridicule it. Another key lesson is the power of resilience in the face of adversity. Throughout her life, Joan faced overwhelming challenges: skepticism from those around her, rejection from the French court, betrayal from allies, and ultimately, capture and execution. Yet she never allowed these setbacks to shake her core belief in her mission. Joan's resilience wasn't about avoiding pain or discomfort. It was about continuing to act in alignment with her values and purpose, even when faced with seemingly insurmountable obstacles. Joan's resilience is also linked to her capacity for moral courage. She didn't just endure her trials, she met them head-on with unwavering integrity. This is a quality that is often overlooked in the face of challenges. It's not enough to simply survive adversity. True strength lies in maintaining one's values in the face of it. Joan's courage was not born of arrogance or defiance for its own sake. It came from a deeply rooted moral clarity. She knew that, regardless of the consequences, she had a duty to fulfill her mission. And in doing so, she became a symbol of the kind of courage that transcends personal suffering for the greater good. Joan of Arc also teaches us the value of authentic leadership. She didn't rely on external authority or formal training to lead. She led with authenticity, driven by her internal sense of purpose. Her story demonstrates that leadership doesn't have to follow traditional paths. Leadership is often born from a deep sense of personal commitment to a cause. It comes from the ability to inspire others, not through force or control, but by embodying an unwavering commitment to a vision that resonates with others. Joan's leadership was grounded in her conviction, and that conviction inspired people to follow her, even when the rational mind would have dismissed her as unqualified. One of the most profound lessons from Joan's story is the intersection of faith and action. Joan of Arc's faith wasn't passive, it was active. It wasn't enough for her to simply believe she was called to lead. She had to act on that belief with every fiber of her being. Her story challenges us to consider how we integrate our own beliefs, whether religious, personal, or professional, into tangible action. Joan's example shows us that faith, when combined with purposeful action, has the potential to move mountains. In today's world, many of us face challenges that seem beyond our control. Joan's life reminds us that action, rooted in strong belief, can often accomplish what seems impossible. Her legacy also speaks to the importance of aligning actions with a greater purpose. Joan's life was driven by a purpose that extended far beyond her personal survival or success. She wasn't concerned with fame or fortune. She was driven by a sense of divine mission that transcended her own self-interest. In today's world, this lesson is crucial. Many of us struggle with the tension between personal desires and larger goals. Joan's story teaches us the importance of having a greater purpose and aligning our actions with something meaningful, something that will outlive us. Whether it is a personal mission or a cause we believe in, aligning with that greater purpose can give us the strength to persist, no matter the obstacles. Lastly, Joan's life encourages us to embrace our own unique path. She did not follow the conventional route to leadership. She carved her own way. This lesson is particularly valuable in a world that often rewards conformity. Joan teaches us that our personal journeys, no matter how unconventional, can be the very thing that sets us apart and leads us to make a profound impact on the world. Her life serves as a reminder that the most powerful forces for change often come from those who refuse to follow the beaten path, choosing instead to create a new way forward. In sum, Joan of Arc's story is a profound lesson in the transformative power of conviction, resilience, and moral courage. It teaches us that leadership is not defined by external validation or conventional authority, but by the strength to lead from within, guided by a sense of purpose. Joan's legacy endures because her life embodied these universal principles, and her ability to inspire and empower others continues to resonate across generations. While Joan of Arc's story may seem like a relic of the past, the lessons she imparted are deeply relevant to our lives today. Her life offers us psychological tools to navigate the challenges we face, whether in personal endeavors, professional pursuits, or societal challenges. Drawing from Joan's strength, conviction, and leadership, we can find actionable strategies to cultivate our own inner power and resilience. One of the key lessons from Joan's journey is the importance of cultivating inner conviction. Joan was not swayed by the doubts of others. Her belief in her mission was unwavering, and this deep self-belief was the foundation of her leadership. To apply this in our own lives, we must first identify what we truly believe in, what causes or values resonate with us deeply. By clarifying our own values and purpose, we can begin to align our actions with those beliefs, even when external pressures try to convince us otherwise. This process of self-discovery begins with reflection and self-awareness. Take time to reflect on what you stand for. What are your personal values? What do you feel compelled to do, even in the face of obstacles or criticism? Joan of Arc's clarity of purpose came from a place of deep introspection and a willingness to listen to her inner calling. Similarly, cultivating conviction requires us to listen to the quiet voice within that guides us towards our greater purpose. Once we have clarity on our values and beliefs, the next step is to develop resilience. Life will inevitably challenge our conviction. We will face rejection, doubt, and failure. But it is in these moments that resilience becomes crucial. Joan's resilience wasn't about avoiding failure. It was about maintaining her focus, belief, and determination despite setbacks. In our own lives, we can cultivate resilience by reframing challenges as opportunities for growth rather than obstacles that define us. A powerful tool for building resilience is emotional regulation. In high-pressure situations, Joan was able to stay grounded and focused on her mission. We can develop similar emotional resilience through mindfulness practices, journaling, or meditation, techniques that help us remain centered and connected to our inner purpose, even when external circumstances feel overwhelming. Another important lesson from Joan is the power of authentic leadership. Joan led not by military knowledge or political strategy, but through her authenticity and unwavering belief in her cause. To lead authentically, we must be willing to step into our own unique leadership roles, regardless of external expectations. This means embracing our individual strengths, even if they don't align with traditional notions of leadership or success. To apply this principle, we can begin by leading in our personal and professional lives with authenticity and integrity. Ask yourself, what kind of leader do I want to be? How can I bring my true self into the spaces I inhabit? Leading authentically is not about having the title or the position. It's about showing up with honesty, conviction, and a willingness to inspire others through your actions. Joan also teaches us the importance of action based on purpose. Her journey wasn't just about holding a belief, it was about putting that belief into action. Each step she took was rooted in her mission. To emulate this in our own lives, we can start by identifying one small, tangible action that aligns with our beliefs. Whether it's volunteering for a cause we believe in, standing up for our values in our workplace, or simply speaking up for justice in our communities. Every action we take brings us closer to living out our purpose. Finally, moral courage is a critical aspect of leadership and resilience. Joan's refusal to back down in the face of adversity, especially during her trial, demonstrates the power of moral courage. To cultivate moral courage, we must practice standing by our values, even when doing so is difficult. This can mean making difficult decisions, confronting injustice, or speaking out against the status quo. Joan's life shows us that moral courage doesn't come from an absence of fear. It comes from the willingness to act despite it. One way to cultivate moral courage is through self-reflection. Before facing a tough decision, reflect on what your core values are and how you can act in alignment with those values, regardless of the consequences. Over time, as you continue to make decisions that are in line with your beliefs, moral courage will become second nature. These psychological tools, conviction, resilience, authenticity, purposeful action, and moral courage, are not just theoretical. They are practical strategies we can begin to apply in our daily lives. Joan's journey shows us that the true power of leadership and personal strength comes from within, and that we all have the potential to rise above external challenges by staying true to our beliefs and acting with integrity. While Joan of Arc's story is one of profound conviction, resilience, and unwavering purpose, it also raises important psychological questions about the fine line between belief and delusion. Joan's certainty in her divine mission was a driving force behind her actions, but how can we separate deep spiritual conviction from a potentially distorted perception of reality? What is the difference between holding fast to a deeply held belief and succumbing to a belief that is detached from reason or evidence? These questions, while complex, are crucial in understanding the psychological dynamics that made Joan such a unique historical figure. Psychologically speaking, cognitive dissonance plays a role in understanding Joan's unshakable faith. Cognitive dissonance is the discomfort experienced when we hold two conflicting beliefs or when our beliefs are challenged by external evidence. For Joan, there was no conflict between her faith and her mission. Her belief in the voices she heard was absolute. In fact, her commitment to her mission was so strong that she was able to reject all doubt, both from within herself and from the world around her. While this conviction was a source of strength, it also raises the question, at what point does such certainty become a barrier to rational decision-making? In Joan's case, her belief was so deeply intertwined with her identity that it allowed her to push through enormous adversity. Yet, the subjective nature of her experience, her visions and her voices, complicates the narrative. Was Joan hearing the voices of saints, as she claimed, or was she experiencing auditory hallucinations, which can sometimes occur under conditions of extreme stress or mental fatigue? The line between profound faith and psychological condition can be difficult to discern, especially when the individual has such intense personal conviction. However, what we can definitively observe is that Joan's faith was a psychological anchor that helped her navigate immense challenges, even in the absence of objective proof. The psychological complexities of Joan's experiences also intersect with the societal reactions to her leadership, particularly as a young woman in a deeply patriarchal society. Joan's unconventional leadership, as a woman leading men into battle, was not only seen as extraordinary because of her gender, but also because it defied the expectations of what was considered possible for someone of her social class and sex. Throughout history, women who take on roles traditionally held by men often face scrutiny and ridicule. For Joan, her very existence as a leader challenged societal norms and the psychological assumptions about what was acceptable for women to do. Her trial also reflected these societal challenges. The English and the French nobility, many of whom were threatened by her influence, tried to delegitimize her, not only by accusing her of heresy, but also by emphasizing her gender transgression. Joan was criticized for wearing men's clothing, for speaking with authority, and for taking on a role traditionally reserved for men. Her courage in facing these attacks on her identity was not just a testament to her personal conviction, it also exposed the psychological power of gender norms and societal expectations. The trial itself, under the guise of a religious inquisition, also reflects the complexity of religious belief. Joan's faith, though deeply sincere, was viewed with skepticism by both religious and political authorities, who sought to break her down psychologically. The trial was designed to exploit her vulnerabilities, to force her to question the very foundation of her mission. Yet Joan's ability to resist these pressures, her refusal to recant her beliefs, highlighted her incredible psychological endurance. She not only refused to give up her conviction, but she also maintained a sense of clarity and resolve throughout the process. This brings us to another nuance in understanding Joan's journey: the role of collective hope in empowering an individual. Joan of Arc was not an isolated figure driven by internal belief alone. Her success also depended on the collective belief of the people around her. At Orléans, her belief gave hope to a demoralized army. The French soldiers rallied not just to her leadership, but to the hope that she represented. In many ways, Joan's psychological impact was as much about inspiring hope in others as it was about the conviction she held within herself. Her leadership was rooted in a shared belief system that transcended individual doubt. Joan's capacity to instill courage and unity in her troops, to make them believe in their potential, illustrates how hope can transform individuals and groups. It's a reminder that belief is contagious. When one person has an unshakable conviction, it can inspire others to take bold actions that they might not have considered otherwise. Joan, even in her solitary moments of doubt, was able to generate shared belief, a psychological phenomenon that fueled the French resistance and led to military victory. Finally, it's worth considering the historical interpretations of divine intervention versus psychological phenomena. Many people who encountered Joan were convinced that she was divinely inspired, and her eventual canonization by the Catholic Church affirmed this belief. However, modern psychology often seeks to explain extraordinary experiences through different lenses: mental states, trauma responses, or even psychological coping mechanisms. Joan's visions and voices, when viewed through a contemporary psychological lens, might be seen as manifestations of her intense psychological state, a way for her to process her overwhelming sense of duty and her mission. However, whether one views Joan's experiences as divine inspiration or as psychological phenomena, the impact of her conviction is undeniable. Her ability to lead with such clarity, her power to inspire, and her extraordinary resilience in the face of enormous challenges suggests that belief, whether divine or psychological, is a force that can shape the course of history. Joan of Arc's life offers a profound exploration of the power of conviction, belief, and resilience in the face of extraordinary challenges. Her journey from a humble farm girl to a national hero and ultimately a martyr reveals that true power doesn't come from external authority, military skill, or social status. Instead, it comes from an unshakable, deeply personal conviction, the kind of belief that drives an individual to act with purpose and courage, and even in the face of skepticism, rejection, and death. Joan's story is not just about faith in a religious sense, but about the psychological power of belief in one's purpose. Her ability to hold firm to her mission, despite overwhelming external pressure, showcases the transformative impact of personal conviction. Joan's unwavering belief in her divine calling allowed her to achieve the impossible, inspire thousands, and change the course of history. But it also reminds us that such belief, while powerful, is not without its complexities. Her faith was a source of strength, but it also led her into situations where her perception of reality was questioned and manipulated by others. Her life challenges us to consider the true meaning of leadership. Is it about titles, power, or traditional credentials? Or is it about the ability to inspire and act in alignment with a greater vision, one that transcends societal expectations and personal limitations? Joan of Arc's extraordinary story demonstrates that leadership at its core is about authenticity, resilience, and the courage to act on one's deepest convictions, even when the world doubts you, and even when the consequences are unimaginable. Through Joan's life, we see how the intersection of faith, courage, and psychological strength can create monumental change. It is not always the most qualified or experienced who lead. Sometimes it is the person with an unwavering belief that is destined to make a difference. Joan of Arc's legacy teaches us that the most profound forces in history often arise from a deeply personal, internal sense of purpose, one that can inspire others to follow, even in the face of overwhelming odds. What convictions or beliefs are speaking to you that the world may dismiss? How can you draw strength from them and lead in your own life with the same unwavering resolve that Joan of Arc did? Reflect on your own purpose and consider how you can act on it with the same courage, resilience, and authenticity. Joan's legacy shows us that ordinary people, driven by an extraordinary belief, can change the course of history. What can you do today to start living in alignment with your own convictions? Joan of Arc's story is not just one of victory or tragedy. It is a timeless reminder that true power lies in staying true to one's deepest beliefs, even when the world says it is impossible. Her courage, resilience, and unshakable conviction continue to inspire us to act on our own truths, no matter the challenges ahead. Thank you for watching. Keep believing in the power of your inner strength, and remember, like Joan of Arc, you have the potential to change the world through your unwavering conviction.